Good to see you, Bruce. It's been a while.
The time Batman Beyond met Superman from Superman the Animated Series. I think Batman Beyond is probably one of the most unique Batman storylines ever. It pushes the legacy of the Dark Knight into the future. Gotham has undergone a serious change and Bruce Wayne is older, and even though the mantle has been passed on, the mission still remains the same. Now, for those who don't know, Superman, the Animated Series, is a part of the same shared universe, even though it is a few decades earlier on the timeline. There is a rather interesting comic book crossover event that takes place on the pages of Superman Adventures, Part 64, and it marks the bridge between the two worlds. The story takes the future Batman and throws him into Superman's era, because something Superman is about to do will have the worst possible repercussion in the future. You have the sinister Brainiac pulling the strings, and a time-travelling Batman must save the day before it's too late. Without further ado, let me quickly take you through the entire story, and you will understand why this feels like a perfect collision of the DCAU timeline. I love how the story opens with a bang. There's no lengthy introduction or context, and we're thrown right in the middle of an intense action sequence. Batman Beyond jumps in front of Superman, who is caught up in some mission, and he asks him to let go of Brainiac's missile. Of course, Superman is confused by this sudden appearance, and he mistakes this aggressive advice for an attack. Also, he is not too familiar with the new age Batman's costume and gear. He thinks that Brainiac has sent this individual to distract him while his missile threatens the security of Metropolis, and Superman is not someone who will be manipulated so easily. Batman tries to explain that he is not a threat to the city, but Superman unknowingly is, and they get into a fight for a while. Superman says by accelerating the rocket's trajectory, Batman is dooming the planet to a nuclear winter and warns him to get out of the way. But Batman refuses to comply. The opening sequence itself is chaotic and confusing, and I was immediately hooked onto the narrative. After all, who doesn't like a good old-fashioned Batman versus Superman duel? But even as they try to stop each other, both Batman and Superman try to explain their side of the story. Batman suggests that Superman has no understanding of how high the stakes are, and the scuffle continues as they both try to wrest control over the missile. Batman finally reveals that he is indeed in a position to know what Superman is thinking because he is the Batman from beyond. Superman doesn't immediately buy into the explanation, and he dismissively says that just by dressing like Batman and saying a random line, he will not fool Superman. But Batman has more up his sleeve to convince Superman that he is not a hoax or a distraction. He reveals his knowledge about the Batcave under the Wayne Manor, and goes on to say how Superman plans to propose to Lois Lane by the methane falls on Jupiter. Finally, Superman understands that there is something deeper going on here that is beyond his understanding, and he starts to relent. He asks Batman what he thinks needs to be done, and Batman asks him to do anything except flying the missile into the sun. Just when I thought the operation couldn't get any better, the real stakes are revealed. Superman is still slightly confused because he had calculated that disposing the missile into the sun would cause no damage, but this is where he was wrong. Then Batman reveals the real deal, and we finally get to know why he's actually here in the timeline in the first place. 30 years into the future, it is a strange new world where there are threats that nobody even imagined in this timeline of Superman. To make matters worse, the Earth experiences a devastating solar flare which causes temperatures to soar abnormally to like 100 degrees. This is where the real mentor of Batman Beyond, Bruce Wayne, deduces the reason, and it turns out to be caused by Superman disposing of Brainiac's missile into the sun. In response, the future heroes, with the guidance of Bruce Wayne, authorize a desperate time travel mission, and this sends Batman Beyond roughly 30 years back in time to stop the Superman from firing the shot that devastates Earth in the future. However, by now, every second counts, and the cosmic issue then reveals the true sinister nature of the real mastermind, Brainiac. A futuristic Brainiac has engineered the entire situation, including the solar aggression missile, and crucially, even Terry's time travel itself. The twist is that Terry thinks he's gone rogue to fix history, but Brainiac has anticipated his move. The temporal jump is just another variable in Brainiac's larger plan to exploit future technology in the past. Through either narration or villain exposition, it's explained the solar aggressor is designed not to dispose of a threat, but to weaponize the sun, triggering a solar flare that will bake future Earth and create the hostile climate Terry comes from. Superman learns more about the missile's true purpose. What he believed was a legitimate, possibly even government-endorsed save the world disposal is actually a Trojan horse designed to turn Earth's own star into a long-term weapon. Terry underscores that in his future, history remembers this as the moment Superman unintentionally doomed the climate. So from Terry's angle, stopping this launch, even by force, is an act of salvation, not rebellion. Now, even though Terry has given enough evidence to trust him, Superman must decide whether to trust a stranger from the future and risk letting a dangerous device remain active, or proceed and risk repeating the catastrophe Terry describes. Meanwhile, Brainiac escalates the fight, and instead of directly attacking Superman, he hacks and remotely invades the most advanced tech in the scene, Terry's Batman Beyond Batsuit. The AI seizes control of the suit systems mid-flight, turning Terry's greatest asset into a liability. Terry suddenly loses control of his own body movements as the suit responds not to him but to Brainiac's commands. In a dramatic moment, Terry is sent spiraling out of control, plummeting from the sky as the suit refuses his input. Superman is forced to abandon the missile for a moment and dive to save Terry, catching him before impact and roaring at Brainiac, calling him a monster for turning his ally's own body and tech against him. I'm always amused by Superman's understanding of goodness, even after spending so much time with the worst villains ever. Of course, Brainiac would do monstrous things, even if you condemn him to death. However, things really start to change from here on. The rescue and Brainiac's cruelty solidify the alliance. Superman now sees Terry as a victim of Brainiac rather than an attacker, and Terry realizes he has to trust Superman completely to stop the plan in both timelines. As Terry is pulled free or regains partial control, he finally gives Superman the full context. The future, the climate catastrophe, the way history blames Superman, and how Brainiac has manipulated events, so both the missile and Terry's time travel serve his larger design. Superman, hearing this, is effectively Brainiac's long game spanning decades, commits to stopping the missile and taking down this advanced version of his own Emily. I am a huge fan of how the comic builds to a major action sequence with at least one standout 2-page spread, visually emphasizing the rare team-up of Superman and Batman Beyond against the futuristic Brainiac. Superman engages Brainiac directly, likely facing a physically manifested drone-body or heavily armed platform connected to the missile system. While Terry uses whatever functionality remains in his suit to counter Brainiac's hacking, sabotage his hardware and neutralize external threats. The choreography highlights their complementary styles, with Superman's straight-line power and durability contrasted with Terry's agile, tech-driven combat and problem-solving using gadgets, stealth, and quick tactical thinking. I really appreciate how the comic issue is not telling a random story. There is even a callback to Bruce Wayne and his legacy, even if it is subtle and in the background. Bruce Wayne's role appears in the background through either flashbacks or references as the original Batman, and Terry's mentor in the future. His presence reinforces that Terry is not just a random costume visitor, but the legitimate successor to the Batman legacy, carrying Bruce's training and tactical outlook into Superman's timeline. There is also a nod to the Call era, Justice League crossover, with a quick montage or acknowledgement of Terry's future career and relationship with Superman, establishing that this adventure becomes their first meeting chronologically from Superman's perspective, even though Terry will later meet an older Superman in his own show. I think all this adds the much-needed depth and context to the story. In the climax, the heroes successfully thwart Brainiac's multi-layered scheme. The solar aggressor missile is prevented from reaching the sun, disarmed, diverted, or destroyed before it can trigger the catastrophic solar flare. Brainiac's control over the Batman Beyond suit is severed, freeing Terry from direct possession. Brainiac's future tech foothold in this era is damaged enough that his long-term climate weapon plan collapses, at least in its current configuration. This victory technically rewrites the future Terry came from, or at least opens the possibility that his devastated world might be averted or altered through the comic plays, coy with paradox mechanics, and doesn't fully spell out every consequence. With the crisis resolved and the missile no longer a threat, Terry prepares to return to his own time. There's an awareness that the meeting sits in a strange place in the timeline. For Terry, Superman is the legendary hero he grew up with, and for Superman, this young Batman is from the future he may never fully understand. What I find really intriguing is how the story lightly lampshades the time paradox question of whether their team-up and the prevention of the solar flare disaster will radically alter Terry's future, by having the characters essentially shrug it off with a maybe, and a focus on doing the right thing in the present. There is even an adorable moment when the heroes aren't even sure if they will remember the event once Terry goes back to his own time. The issue closes on the note that this is, from Superman's chronological point of view, his first team-up with Batman Beyond, decades before the Justice League Unlimited episode The Call, cementing this comic as key connective tissue in DCAU lore. So now you know why I started off by calling this a really crucial part of extensive narrative that potentially connects the two worlds. If you ask me, what really impresses me about this comic issue is the unexpected nature of the narrative. I wasn't expecting a time-travelling Batman to jump into the scheme of things, and everything happens so abruptly that it takes you by surprise. The story is so fast-paced and action-packed that you barely have a breather, and when you think of how the future timeline pans out, you realise that the whole thing is so crucial for the fate fate of humanity. It is also a fun moment to see the future version of Batman interacting with his old and trusted ally Superman for one crucial mission. And overall, I personally rate this comic series very highly. Say what you will, but such quality of comic book stories are hard to come back these days. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the story. And also share your take on the legacy of Batman in the Batman Beyond universe, because I know there are many who don't like the idea of an older Bruce Wayne passing the mantle.